Smoke reaches me before sound does. I am 3 ridges deep in the Hallowwood, checking a snare line I don't need to check, when the wind turns and brings me a smell that doesn't belong in my forest, pitch oil and burning thatch, not the clean wood smoke of a hearth fire banked for the night. My wolf is on its feet inside my chest before my mind has finished the thought. I am running before I have decided to run. I should say first what I am, because I have spent 6 years making sure no one has to know it. I am Corvin Ashgrove, and by an accident of blood I am the Alpha King of the Hallowwood, heir to a throne I have not sat on since I was 19 years old, king of a court I have not held audience with since my father's funeral. I left the great hall to my uncle's steady hand, and I went into the trees, because the trees never asked anything of me I could not give, and the court always did. 6 years living closer to the wolves than to my own kind. 6 years of being, to anyone who does not know better, just a man who lives alone in the deep wood and keeps to himself. I tell myself it is penance. I tell myself it is grief still, for a father who died with the succession unsettled, and a son who ran rather than face what came after. I tell myself many things, out there among the old oaks, and none of them explain why my chest goes tight some nights for no reason I can name, why I have woken at 3 a.m. more times than I can count with the strange conviction that something in the world is missing, the way you'd notice a held breath you didn't know you'd been holding. I did not know, that afternoon with the wind full of smoke, that I was about to find out why. Thistlemere sits at the southern hem of the Hallowwood, where the old trees give way to cleared fields and a scatter of stone and timber houses along a slow brown river. It is not my village in any way that matters to a crown, my father's maps barely bothered to name it, but it is inside my territory, under my protection by blood, and by old law whether I have honored that law or not. I have walked its lanes perhaps a dozen times in 6 years, always at dusk, always alone, trading a brace of rabbits for bread at the baker's stall, and speaking to no one longer than it takes to say thank you. I did not know a healer lived there. I did not know her name was Mara Fenwick. I did not know that the reason my chest has ached on certain nights for 6 years has a face, and hands, and a voice that was, at that moction, screaming for people to run. I come out of the tree line at a dead sprint, and the village is a wound laid open under the sky. Half a dozen houses already gone to flame, black smoke rolling low across the thatch of the rest. And men, a dozen, maybe more, wearing the green and brass livery of a trading company I recognize distantly. The Vantry Company, foreign lords who have spent 2 years petitioning my uncle's steward for logging rights to the Hallowwood southern stands and being refused, again and again, because the wood does not belong to men who would clear it for coin. They have decided, it seems, to simply take what was refused them, and to burn the people in their way to make the point. There are villagers running with buckets that cannot possibly matter against fires that size. There are children being pulled by the arm toward the tree line. There is an old man on his knees in the mud outside a burning house, too winded or too stubborn to move, and there is a woman, dark hair loose and singed at one side, skirts scorched black at the hem, standing over him with her body between him and 2 mounted men who are shouting at her to move. She does not move. I have never in my life covered ground the way I cover it in the next 10 seconds. Something in me that has been asleep for 6 years opens its eyes all at once, and I do not think. I only run, faster than a man should be able to run, faster than my wolf has ever pulled me before, because every part of me has decided in the same half-second that if those riders touch her, I will tear this entire company apart with my hands and enjoy it. I reach them as the nearer rider swings down off his horse and closes a gauntleted hand around her arm. Let her go. My voice comes out of me in a register I don't recognize, low and carrying, and every man within 30 feet goes still the way animals go still before a storm breaks. The rider actually loosens his grip, some old instinct in him answering an authority he cannot name, and in that half-second of hesitation, The woman wrenches free and puts herself again between the soldier and the old man on the ground. "He can't walk," she says, not to me, to the rider, fierce and low as if I have not just arrived close enough to touch her. "You'll have to go through me." "Lady, we don't want." The rider starts and I am there. I don't remember deciding to move. I remember my hand closing around the rider's wrist before his sword clears its scabbard, and I remember the crack of bone under my grip, and I remember him screaming and going down, and I remember the second rider wheeling his horse toward me with a torch raised like a weapon, and I remember taking it out of his hand and putting him on the ground beside his fellow, with a blow I pull at the last instant only because some disciplined part of me does not want to kill a man in front of a woman I have known for 4 seconds. "Get him up," I say to her, meaning the old man, and she does not question it. Good, thank every God. She does not waste breath questioning it. She hooks her arms under the old man's shoulders, and I take his legs, and between us we half carry, half drag him clear of the burning house just as its roof gives way behind us in a gout of sparks. We set him down 30 yards off, in the trampled grass at the tree line, and it is only then, with the old man coughing but breathing, that I finally look at her properly for the first time. I will try to describe what happens, though I don't think there are good enough words for it. It is not like being struck. It is like recognizing something you have never seen before, the way you'd know your own name spoken in a language you don't speak. Her eyes are gray-green, like river stone under shallow water, and there is soot on her cheekbone and blood, not hers. I realize some patience dried dark on her sleeve, and she is looking at me with an expression that is not fear, though it should be, given what I just did to 2 armed men with my bare hands. It is something closer to shock, and then, underneath the shock, something that looks almost like the same recognition I am feeling, though she cannot possibly know what it is. My hand, without my permission, reaches for hers. I feel it before I see it. A heat under the skin of my palm, old and buried, a mark I have had since birth and never once seen do anything but sit there, dormant, the pale scar shape of an oak leaf my father told me was the mark of the wood's old bond, and which every king before me had carried and none, in 3 generations, had ever seen wake. It wakes now. It flares gold-white under my skin the instant my fingers close around hers, bright enough that I see it through my own flesh, and she gasps and looks down at her own palm, and there, where there was nothing a moment before, the same mark blooms to answering light in her skin. For 1 full second, the world goes utterly silent. The fires roar, the shouting, the screaming horses, all of it simply stops, the way sound stops underwater, and every wolf inside the Hallowwood, mine and every other, throws back its head at the same instant and howls, one long unbroken note that I feel in my own chest like a held note finally released. Then the world comes rushing back, the fire roaring, a woman screaming somewhere behind us, hooves, and Mara Fenwick is staring at our joined hands with an expression I will remember for the rest of my life, equal parts terror and wonder, and she says, in a voice gone very small, "What did you just do to me?" "Nothing," I say, because it is the only honest answer I have. "I didn't do anything. It's you. It's been you the whole time." She doesn't understand. How could she? I barely understand it myself. 6 years of a bond I never knew was waiting, and I have half a heartbeat to try to find better words for her before 3 more riders come around the burning granary with drawn blades, and the moment for explanations is over. "Get behind me," I say, and this time she does listen, though I can see it costs her. I can see, even in that first minute, that Mara Fenwick is not a woman built to hide behind anyone. But she steps back, and I turn to face 3 armed men with nothing in my hands but the mark still burning gold on my palm, and I do not feel afraid. I feel, for the first time in 6 years, entirely and completely awake. I will not pretend the fight that follows is graceful. It is not a duel, it is a culling. My wolf is close under my skin in a way it has not been since I was a boy losing control of it for the first time, and I let it closer than I should, because there is a woman at my back whose hand still burns with my own mark, and I find, in that moment, that I do not care in the slightest what it costs me to keep her breathing. I break the first rider's sword arm before he can bring the blade down. I put the second on the ground with a strike that will keep him from riding for a month. The third has more sense than his fellows and wheels his horse and flees back toward the wagons at the village's edge, shouting for the others to fall back, that the Alpha King himself has come out of the wood. He is not wrong. He is the first man in 6 years to say it aloud and be right. The retreat is not total. Vantry's men are mercenaries, not cowards, and their foreman, a broad, gray-bearded man named Oscar Vantry himself, rides up through the smoke shouting for his line to hold, that one man alone cannot stand against 30. He is wrong about that too, but I do not have 30 seconds to prove it to him, because in the chaos of the retreat, in the smoke and the screaming horses, 2 of his men circle wide around the fighting and come at Mara from the side, where I cannot reach her in time. I see it happen and I cannot stop it. One of them gets an arm around her waist and hauls her up onto his saddle before I have crossed half the distance between us, and she is fighting him. I will learn, in the days that follow, that Mara Fenwick does not know how to stop fighting anything, and it is one of perhaps 100 things about her that will undo me completely. She gets an elbow into his ribs and very nearly breaks free, but he is bigger than she is, and he has her wrists pinned before I reach the horse. Corvin. It is the first time she says my name. I don't know how she knows it, someone in the crowd must have shouted it, but hearing it in her voice, afraid and furious in the same breath, does something to me that I do not have language for yet. I catch the horse's bridle as Vantry's man tries to wheel it away, and I do not let go. The animal screams and rears and I hold on through its hooves nearly taking my skull off, because there is a woman on its back who 3 minutes ago I did not know existed, and who I already understand, with a certainty that has nothing to do with reason, that I would burn down every green and brass banner in this company before I let them carry her 1 foot further from me. I drag the rider down off the horse bodily. I do not remember much of what happens to him after that. I remember Mara's hand catching my sleeve, grounding me, her voice saying my name again, softer this time, Corvin, that's enough. He's down, that's enough, and something in me that has been running hot since the smoke first reached me on the ridge finally, slowly, banks itself back down to something like control. Oscar Vantry does not wait to see how the rest of his line fares. He calls the retreat himself, and what is left of his company goes crashing back through the tree line the way they came, leaving 3 men down in the mud of Thistlemere Square and a village half burned behind them. It is not a victory. Half the village is ash. An old woman I will learn was named Grama Voss did not make it out of her house. There will be grief here for a long time. Grief I cannot fight or fix no matter how fast I run or how hard I strike, and I feel the weight of 6 years of absence settle onto my shoulders all at once. Because if I had been sitting the throne my father left me instead of hiding in the trees, Vantry's petitions would have been answered by a king with authority enough to make the answer stick, and men in green and brass would never have thought they could ride into my territory and burn a village for its timber. But Mara Fenwick is alive and breathing, and standing in the ruin of her village with soot on her face and my mark bright on her palm, and when I turn to her, not knowing what to say, not knowing how to begin explaining any of it, she is already moving past me toward a crying child pinned under a fallen beam, calling for someone to bring water, taking charge of the wreckage of her village with a steadiness that makes something in my chest twist with an emotion I don't have a name for yet either. I go to lift the beam. Together, working without a word between us that isn't a practical one, lift here, hold there, careful of his leg, we free the boy. And Mara is on her knees in the mud with him in her lap before I've even set the beam down, her hands moving over him with a competence that tells me everything I need to know about who she is in this village, healer and anchor both, the person everyone turns to when the world is on fire. It is close to an hour before the worst of it is done, the last flames beaten out, the injured sorted and tended, the dead laid out with what dignity can be managed in a ruined square. I work through all of it at her side without either of us discussing that I will stay, because there was never a question of me leaving. My wolf will not settle enough to let me leave. I do not think I would leave even if it would. It is full dark before she finally stops moving, and even then it is only because an older woman, Thistlemere's headwoman, I will learn, a formidable person named Bettina Reyes, takes her firmly by the shoulders and says, "Girl, you have been on your feet since before the fire started. Sit down before you fall down." Mara sits. I sit beside her, on the low stone wall that used to mark the edge of her garden and is now half buried in ash, and for the first time since the smoke reached me on the ridge, there is quiet enough to think. "You're him," she says, not a question, "the Alpha King. The one who lives in the wood and never comes to court." "I am. I've lived here 4 years and never once seen you closer than the baker's stall." "I know." She looks down at her palm, where the mark has settled to a faint golden shimmer under the skin, still visible but banked now, like an ember rather than a flame. "And this?" I take a slow breath. There is no version of this explanation that does not sound insane, and I have had exactly 1 hour in the middle of a burning village to decide how honest I am willing to be with a woman I have known for less time than it takes to boil water. But I find, looking at her, steady-eyed despite the soot and the exhaustion, waiting for an answer rather than demanding one, that I do not want to lie to her. Not even a little. Not even to make this easier. "It's called the mate bond," I say. "It's older than the crown, older than the Hallowwood's current borders. It doesn't happen to every Alpha King. My father never had it. His father before him did, or so the old records say, though I never met my grandmother to ask her. It's supposed to be rare enough that most kings live and die without ever feeling it." I turn my palm up, show her the mark, still glowing faint gold against my skin. "It means the wood itself, the old bond, the oldest magic in the Hallowwood, has decided we belong to each other. It doesn't ask permission first. It just happens, the way weather happens." She is quiet for a long moment, looking between my palm and hers. "That's the maddest thing I've ever heard," she says finally. "And I've spent 4 years pulling arrowheads out of hunters who tell me they definitely didn't do anything stupid to get shot." Something that might almost be a laugh comes out of me, rusty from disuse. "I understand if you don't believe it." "I didn't say I don't believe it." She looks at her palm again, turns her hand slowly in the firelight from what's left of a burning beam nearby. "I felt it. Whatever it is. I felt it the second you touched my hand, like something that's been quiet my whole life suddenly wasn't quiet anymore." She looks up at me, gray-green eyes steady despite everything the day has cost her. "I just don't know what I'm supposed to do with that." "Neither do I admit. I've had this mark since I was born and never seen it do anything until 3 hours ago. I don't have a manual for this any more than you do." That at least seems to land honestly with her, because some of the wariness goes out of her shoulders. "Well," she says, with a tiredness that goes bone-deep, "at least we're equally lost." We sit together in the ruined square while the fires burn down to embers, and the village's dead are given what watch can be kept over them until morning, and I do not leave her side again that night. I do not think, even if the sky itself had asked me to, that I would have been able to. I learn, over the days that follow, that Mara Fenwick has been Thistlemere's healer since she was 17 years old, apprenticed to an old woman who died 4 winters back and left her the cottage, the herb store, and the whole weight of the village's ailments and injuries with nothing but her own steady hands to carry it. I learn that she has no living family. Her parents died of a fever when she was a child, and she was raised piecemeal by whichever household in the village had room and need of an extra pair of hands, until the old healer took her in properly and gave her a trade and a purpose. I learned that she has never once, in the 4 years since, left Thistlemere for longer than it takes to gather herbs in the forest edge, because she does not trust anyone else to be there if someone needs her. I learn, too, in the slower and stranger way you learn a person you are bonded to before you've properly courted them, that she does not frighten easily, that she has a temper she keeps on a very short leash and lets slip only when something she loves is threatened, that she hums while she works and doesn't seem to know she's doing it, and that the mark on her palm, like mine, flares brighter every time we're within arm's reach of each other, as though 6 years of dormant magic is making up for lost time all at once. I do not press her. Whatever this bond has decided about the two of us, I am not the kind of man who believes destiny gives me the right to her heart without earning it. And so, in the week it takes to begin rebuilding what Vantry's men burned, I make myself useful in every way a man can be useful, hauling timber, mending roofs, sitting with the injured at night so she can finally sleep. And I let her come to whatever conclusions about me she comes to in her own time. It is on the 5th night, with half the village's roofs rethatched and the dead properly buried, and a fragile kind of order beginning to return to Thistlemere's ashes, that Bettina Reyes finds me hauling water at the well and says, without preamble, "You know Oscar Vantry hasn't given up." I set the bucket down. I assumed as much. He'll be back. Men like that don't slink off with their tails between their legs over one bad afternoon. They go home, they lick their wounds, they hire more swords, and they come back angrier than before. She studies me with the flat, assessing look of a woman who has run this village's practical business for longer than I've been alive. "You mean to stay and protect us, or you mean to go back to your trees once the roofs are mended?" It is, I realize, the question I have been avoiding asking myself. 6 years of hiding from the throne, from the court, from every obligation that comes with the crown my father left me, and in 5 days, a burning village and a healer with my mark on her palm, have undone more of that hiding than 6 years of my own conscience ever managed. I mean to end it, I say, and I find, saying it, that I mean it entirely. Vantry doesn't get to come back, not to Thistlemere, not anywhere in the Hallowwood. I let my uncle handle the crown's business for 6 years because I didn't want the weight of it. I don't have that luxury anymore. Bettina looks at me for a long moment, and something in her expression softens, just slightly. She'd never ask you to fight her battles for her, you know. That girl's spent 4 years being the one who does the saving. Doesn't know how to be the one who's saved. I've noticed, I say, thinking of Mara standing over an old man in front of a mounted soldier, refusing to move. I don't intend to ask permission. I intend to make sure she never has to stand alone in front of a sword again, whether she asks for it or not. Bettina's mouth twitches, not quite a smile. Good answer, my king. It is the first time in 6 years anyone has called me that, and meant it as something other than an accusation. I ride out 3 days later, not into hiding this time, but toward Vantry's holding at the Hallowwood southern border, where his company has established a logging camp on land my father's treaties never granted him. I do not go alone. Word has spread, in the way word spreads through a territory that has felt its king's absence like a missing tooth for 6 years, that the Alpha King came out of the wood to save a burning village with his bare hands. And by the time I reach the border camp, I have 12 of my own household guard behind me, men who serve my uncle's steady administration, but have never once forgotten whose crown they actually swore to, and word sent ahead, that I mean to speak with Oscar Vantry about the terms of his continued existence in my territory. Mara wanted to come. I want it understood, in whatever account of this night is ever told, that Mara Fenwick fought me for a solid 10 minutes about being left behind at Thistlemere, and that the only thing that stopped her was Bettina Reyes physically standing in the cottage doorway, and reminding her that a village half rebuilt still needs its healer more than it needs another sword in a fight that isn't hers to finish. I do not think Mara has ever, in her life, been comfortable letting someone else carry a danger meant for her. It is one of the things about her I already love, and one of the things I know, with the clear-eyed certainty of a man newly bonded, that I am going to spend the rest of my life gently, respectfully, and absolutely refusing to let her do when the danger involves fire and armed men. The confrontation at Vantry's camp is shorter and less bloody than the burning of Thistlemere, mostly because Oscar Vantry is, whatever else he is, not a stupid man, and the sight of the Hallowoods Alpha King riding into his camp at the head of a dozen household guard, with the unmistakable weight of a man whose wolf is no longer hiding what it is enough to end most of his appetite for further conflict before a single blade is drawn. I do not kill him. I want it on record that I consider it, at length, standing across the fire from a man who ordered a village burned for timber rights he was never going to be granted. But killing him would make me no better than the thing I spent 6 years hiding from becoming, and there is a woman with my mark on her palm who I intend to be worthy of, not merely powerful in front of. Instead, I strip him of every license his company holds anywhere in the Hallowwood. I have his men escorted to the territory's border under guard, and I make it plain, in terms no reasonable man could mistake, that if the green and brass of the Vantry Company is ever seen inside my borders again, the mercy he was shown tonight will not be repeated. It is dawn by the time I ride back into Thistlemere Square, tired down to my bones in a way I have not been tired in 6 years, and Mara is waiting at the well, having clearly not slept at all, wrapped in a shawl against the early cold with an expression on her face that is trying very hard to be composed and failing entirely. "Well," she says, before I've even swung down from the horse. "It's finished," I tell her. "He won't be back. None of them will." Something goes out of her all at once. Some tension she has been carrying, I understand now, since the moment the smoke first rose over her village, maybe since long before that, since the day she took on a whole village's worth of care with no one to share the weight, and she crosses the square and puts her arms around me before either of us has said another word, her face against my shoulder, and I feel the mark on my palm flare hot and bright where my hand comes to rest against her back. "I was afraid," she says, muffled against my coat, "that you'd go out there and not come back, and I'd have to explain to this whole village that their new king got himself killed defending them 5 days after they finally met him." "I came back," I say, "and I mean it as a promise, not just a statement of fact. I intend to keep coming back, for as long as you'll let me." She pulls back enough to look up at me, soot long since washed from her face, gray-green eyes steady in the gray early light. "That's a very large thing to promise a woman you've known for 8 days. "I've known you for 8 days, I agree. "I've been bonded to you, apparently, for a great deal longer than that. Some magic older than either of our grandfathers decided we belonged to each other before either of us had a say in it. I don't intend to waste any more time being cautious about something the wood itself has already settled." She laughs unsteady, somewhere between exhausted and something warmer. "That's either the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, or the strangest." "Both, I think," I say. "I'm told I'm not very practiced at this." "No," she agrees, "you're really not. You're going to need a great deal of help." "I was hoping," I say, "that you might be willing to provide it." I will not pretend that everything that follows in the weeks after is simple, because it is not. There is a village to finish rebuilding, and grief for Grama Voss and the others lost in the fire that does not resolve itself just because the man responsible has been driven off. There is a crown I have to finally, properly reclaim, a court to face after 6 years of absence, an uncle to thank and release from a regency he never asked to hold so long. There is a woman I love, with a certainty that terrifies me slightly in its speed and its totality, who does not make things easy for me in any of the ways that matter, who argues with me about strategy, who refuses point-blank to be moved to the safety of the royal seat until every last roof in Thistlemere is mended, who tells me plainly, 3 weeks into whatever we are becoming to each other, that she will not be a Luna who sits in a castle while her village manages without her. I do not ask her to be that kind of Luna. I would not want her to be, even if she offered. It is 2 months later, On a clear autumn evening with Thistlemere's roofs finally whole again, and the last of the burn-scarred fields turned and replanted, that I stand with her in the rebuilt square. The whole village gathered. Bettina Reyes at the front with an expression of fierce satisfaction she does not bother to hide. The old man I carried out of the fire standing steady on his own 2 feet at her side. And I take Mara Fenwick's hand in front of every person who watched her stand between a mounted soldier and a man too frightened to move. The mark on both our palms burns gold bright, visible even in the last light of evening, and when I say the words that make her mine before my people, not a claiming that takes anything from her, but one that only ever gives, the whole square erupts in a sound I have not heard directed at me since I was a boy sitting my father's throne for the first time. My people, not merely tolerating their reclusive king's return, but cheering him. Mara looks up at me, laughing and crying in the same breath, soot-scarred and steady and entirely, impossibly mine, and I think of 6 years spent hiding in the trees, certain there was nothing in the world I wanted from the crown I'd been born to. I was wrong about almost everything, it turns out, except this. Some bonds are older than the fear that keeps us from them, and worth every year it takes to finally come home to. I told you, she says against my shoulder, that you'd need a great deal of help. You did, I agree and mean, for the first time in 6 years, every word of the life I am promising her. I intend to spend the rest of it grateful you offered.